Good morning. We almost started again.
Good morning. Oh, it's afternoon. Oh my goodness. Please, today we are not having coffee. We're having tea. My name is Jennifer Tom,
And I'm Darlene Rample.
and we are excited. Thank you for joining us. I see two of our friends online. Yay! Please grab a tea. It's a new month, it's a new week, new time change. So we had a few requests and people saying, could you guys do it during lunch hour so that we can catch up? So we are joining you. We should be having lunch,
We should.
right? And
It'd be a little messy though.
right, a little bit, exactly. But we are excited because
Mhm.
let's talk about courage. Even
Mhm.
for us, the courage to change our time.
Mhm.
I mean, we were used to 10 o'clock, now we're going to 12:15.
Mhm.
And I'm excited. The theme for the month is the power of courage. And before we go any further, Darlene has our quote for the day. Really good. Power of courage. Here we go.
So I love this quote, and it says, "It takes strength and courage to admit the truth." And that's what we're going to be talking about today is the courage to be totally honest about how you're feeling and how are you doing. So we're really excited. This is one of our core beliefs for our grief recovery method, our group. This is what we talk about when we do a group, and that's to commit to total honesty about what's going on.
Amazing, amazing. So let's talk about courage. We are going, and today we don't have a guest. Please give us a thumbs up if you're out there. Give us so that we know you are there. And before we get into the real stuff, we just want to talk about our grief talk and why we're here this afternoon and why we do this. Friends, we're here to share lessons learned from life and loss. And this month, again, we're going to talk about courage. And when we talk about courage, we're going to put it in the aspect of losses. And when we talk about losses, we're just not talking about death of a loved one. We're talking about loss of trust, loss of relationship, loss of health, loss of what is happening right now. How do we demonstrate courage when there's so much negativity out there? So we're here to share the lessons we've learned in our life and our losses. So before we start, before Darlene shares her story, I've got 4 ideas that I've learned through my lessons learned about how to get the courage. Number 1, we need to speak up.
Yeah.
Speak up more for yourself and others. The more we speak up, the more we get courage, the more we demonstrate courage. Most times we don't speak up for ourselves and we don't speak up for others. So guess what happens? We go into isolation. And Darlene knows all about isolation and when we decide to do that. Do you want to just comment on that, Darlene?
So yeah, when we don't speak up, we actually usually turn inward, right? And we start blocking out things. And when we don't have a chance to have a voice, often we internalize, we pull back, we withdraw. Because we're scared to share our feelings. We're scared that maybe nobody will understand. We're scared that maybe somebody will criticize us. And so we actually turn inward and we actually isolate ourselves from other people.
I love it. I love it. And we feel alone.
Yes, very alone.
We feel alone. So number 1, to demonstrate courage in the midst of everything that's happening or the losses that we've all had losses in our lives. Speak up for yourself and others. Number 2, we're going to share 3 of them. Number 2 is that we need to adopt the role model mindset.
Okay.
When I say when you become the role model, or if you want to be the role model, even when you don't feel like showing up, you show up. So, for example, even as a parent, as a mom, I've got young kids, and sometimes I don't feel like doing something, but because I want to be the role model, I show up for them. So the question is, what kind of a role model do you want to be? Because every time we do the role model, we demonstrate courage. Friends, I have to tell you, Darlene and I, we drink coffee, we drink tea, we do this, but sometimes we don't feel like showing up. But we have had to demonstrate courage because we need to show up, because this is our mission. Our mission is to share life lessons learned from life and loss. And lastly, we need to ask for help more often. Most times we don't ask for help. We keep it in. We pile it in. I like my son, our son who is 13, he says, we stuff it in. Stuff it like a stuffer. Right? So how often do we ask for help? And you don't need to ask for help. Let's try this. Try and ask for help when you don't need it.
Okay.
That is courage. So those 3 points is what's going to set us up for this month. And we're here to encourage you, to encourage you about the power of courage. 3 things. Speak up more for yourself and others. Adopt a role model mindset and ask for help. I'm excited about this.
Yes.
And
I'm scared.
We're scared.
That takes courage.
That takes courage.
Especially to ask for help. That's
Yes.
one of my hard ones, right? I am learned to be independent, and it's really hard to ask for help.
Yes. And how many of us don't like to ask for help? Especially when you don't need it. I'm practicing that in my life, to ask for help. I asked Darlene, how do you do that? Just ask. And that way you demonstrate courage. Sometimes we think courage, you have to know everything and show up. Right? No. Courage is asking for help when you don't need it. And today we're going to ask for your help, our friends, about how do you demonstrate courage in your own life. We need to know. Help us. Help us understand, how do you demonstrate courage? Because this month, we need it. We need it because we're going to bring in some guests in the next Grief Talks. And we're going to be asking these questions, and we're going to ask them for help, because we are all, I don't like to say it, I will say this though, we can grow together if we can demonstrate that courage.
Awesome.
Yeah, what do you
Thanks
think?
so much for sharing.
Great.
That is amazing. And also, and then, yes, it takes courage to share, and it takes courage to share truthfully. And so one of the things I've learned is that when somebody asks me how I'm doing and I say, oh, I'm fine, and usually I follow up with, how are you doing? Is that I'm actually usually not being honest about what I'm feeling. And I've just been, struggling with that, and how, as we go through grief and loss, as we work through things, how do we be totally honest? Not telling everybody everything about us, but being emotionally honest and saying, well, no, I'm actually struggling. And this month, somebody asked me how I'm doing, and I'm like, I'm still struggling with grief from my mom. And she was like, wow, like it was like a different, I didn't have to say a lot, but she just knew I was struggling. And it felt good to actually be honest and not be just covering up what we're feeling.
I love that, darling. Thank you for sharing. September, we can see you. Thank you for joining us. I love it. We could come help you vacuum, okay? Thank you for joining us, September. I know, let's ask for help. We all, like, seriously, asking for help is huge for me. I love to ask the kids to help me vacuum. I like to tell them, Mommy needs help. Annette, thank you so much for joining us. And I have to give a shout out to Annette because last month we talked about gratitude, and I asked you all to help us come up with ideas of things to share. And Annette Stanwyck shared that she would like to hear the power of courage, especially related to grief. And all of us, please tune in because November 24th, Annette will be one of our speakers. So I'm going to read. A few years ago, I was planning to speak a tour in my home state of Idaho. I needed help. I contacted several people and asked for their help. They truly stepped up to help me, and it turned out great. Annette, thank you for sharing. So true. We all have stories on how we can ask for help because that helps us with our courage. Woo! This is so good. This is so good. Okay, so
can we share this one?
Yes, please.
So this is from September. So I learned about courage this year when I left my job and started an MBA program. Awesome. It's been tough and expensive year. I admire people who pivot. Oh, September. That's so great.
Oh, September, thank you for sharing. Isn't that amazing? Like that kind of taking the step forward despite. And we have friends and family who are calling, and it's tough, like losing jobs. And how do you get the courage to get up
and go?
And go, right? And how do you ask for help, especially when we're not used to asking for help? How do you speak up for yourself and others? It's huge. So Darlene is going to share with us the impact of.
Okay. So what happens when we don't speak up? When we don't, and when we're thinking about grief and loss, so those things, whether it's a death or it's your health or whatever the loss is, when we don't, when we're unwilling to think about or talk about those feelings, we often lose fond memories, right? Fond memories can turn painful. We don't want to talk about it. We only want to see the positive or negative aspects of a relationship. That means that we're not being honest and talking about our grief. And the impact, right? The impact of us not sharing our grief is everywhere. Thousands of mental health professionals that we work with or have heard from have found that although their clients come with some other presenting issues, almost all of them have unresolved grief as an underlying problem. And this is so true. So I've been working with people for 20 years, and almost all the time when they came with crisis, when they came with hurts, it was almost always to do with grief and loss. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. That's why we're learning about it, because there's so much pain that nobody's talking about, nobody's allowed to talk about. And I just love working with people. And when you can share, when they share with you their story and you just listen to them, it's incredible. But I've also learned that I need to share too. So what I love about our grief and loss group, our program, is that we all share. And it's taught us that we, even as leaders, as role models, need to share what our grief and loss and how we work through our grief and loss.
I love that, darling. Thank you for sharing. And for our friends out there, please, I'd like to remind all of you, that when we talk about grief, it's just not loss of a loved one, my friends. It's loss of relationship, loss of any loss. And any loss, I love this definition that grief is a normal reaction. Normal and natural reaction to any loss. So when we say grief, we're talking about that normal reaction that we feel. And if we don't share and we're not honest about how we feel, that's what happens. Like there's other issues that come after. So we are just excited about this month, about the power of courage, and we'll continue to share this.
Mhm.
So we had the courage to change the time. Thank
Mhm.
you. And as we close, I just want to share that the letting go of what has happened in the past helps us to helps us to find more courage in the present. I'll just repeat that. Letting go of what has happened in the past helps us find more courage in the present.
Mhm.
So that's our theme.
Mhm.
We're going to find courage in the present. We're going to find courage today because we're going to let go of what has already happened.
Mhm.
So we can do this together this month. We're going to let go of the past. We're going to be honest with our pains. We're going to be honest with our losses, and that will help us get the courage that we need to move forward.
Mhm.
So thank you so much for having your lunch with us,
Mhm.
joining us for some tea time. Please stay tuned. Join us next week, Wednesday, same time, 12:15.
Mhm.
We're going to call it a lunch break for Grief Talk. Until then, demonstrate some courage.